truly a personal confidant of the president, incredibly close to the president's son, Donald Trump Jr., and really, in many ways, the beating heart of the MAGA movement, his Turning Point USA organization, not just a campus organization, David. This was an organization that put on some of the largest and most ambitious conventions, rallies, events for Donald Trump around the country, with pyrotechnics and huge crowds. Also, one other thing I think that is very important about Charlie Kirk is that he was somebody, particularly in recent months, who was making a point to try to engage with those that he disagreed with. Look, he had far-right views, some very controversial views, but he sat down not long ago and did a podcast with Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. On his college campus tours, he would often give speeches, he would be protested, but then when it was over, when the discussion was over, his part of speaking, he would welcome questions from the crowds, including hostile questions in many cases from college students, and engage in those who found his views deeply problematic and offensive. He wanted to engage in those people, and he did so directly. And in fact, that appears to be what he was doing today in Utah when this horrific event happened.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, John. John, thank you. John Carr reporting on his call with President Trump moments ago. And again, Charlie Kirk has died after being shot at Utah Valley University. You heard John mention there that he welcomed debate, wanted to engage on college campuses, was known for his conservative views, though he welcomed people from the other side of the aisle and tried to engage with them. Engaging in debate, heated debate at times. And in fact, as John mentions, it was during one of those questions, one of those debate-like moments that this horrible event played out in Utah today. Let's get the latest on the suspect, because for a time, school officials had said a suspect was in custody, but police at this hour say the suspect is still at large. So let's bring in our chief investigative correspondent, Aaron Katersky, to help us make sense of the language, the semantics here. Bottom line, police are saying that the suspect is still at large. Bring us up to speed on that part of this and what we thought was the case, that there was someone in custody in connection, potentially.
Just after the shooting took place, David, the university had said that the shooter was in custody, but quickly the university and Orem police in Utah are now saying there is still a suspect at large. But they've also told us, David, there is no call to shelter in place at this time. So there does not appear to be a concern by law enforcement about any wider threat from the individual who shot and killed Charlie Kirk. This all went down just after noon local time in Utah. Kirk was speaking beneath a tent at an outdoor event on the university campus. It was a controversial event from the start. Supporters of his and opponents of his were gathered in that space together. The eyewitness accounts have said it was probably 60-40 supporter versus non. And he was being asked a question about gun violence on American campuses when that shot rang out. Law enforcement sources who have seen the same video we have, David, have taken a look at it and said it appeared the shot came from a high-caliber weapon. It does not appear that Kirk could have survived the nature of his very grim injury to the neck.
Stick
David.
with us here, Aaron. I have some follow-up questions for you. And for our audience watching, we're going to be on the air right up until about 5 p.m. Eastern. For many of you here in the East, we'll then join your local news at 5 p.m. Aaron Katersky, I want to come back to you because we're looking at the crowds there at Utah Valley University racing from the scene when they heard that gunshot. Obviously, we're not going to show the moment. It is horrific. And when the shot was fired, as you point out, Aaron, and John Carl was talking about this earlier, he was engaged in what he welcomed, which was debate from all angles, all sides. And it was a question, in fact, about gun violence and mass shootings in this country over the last several years, Aaron. And it appeared, and it's very early, and obviously the investigation is just underway, but it appears that that shot was fired from, what, a couple hundred yards away, another building on campus there?
It would seem so, about 200 yards away, David, but the authorities haven't said for sure. They have not identified the weapon, but law enforcement sources are telling us it appears to have been a high-caliber weapon. The shot fired at a high velocity, striking Charlie Kirk. It appeared from the video, and according to eyewitnesses, in the neck. It was a very bloody injury. Immediately, the crowd gathered there in that courtyard to hear him speak started running and saying they could not believe what they had witnessed. There was security with Charlie Kirk. His visits on campuses across the country are often controversial. It appeared to us to be about 5 or 6 individuals making up his security detail. Often they're scanning the crowd for weapons at close range, maybe not something off in the distance, and it was his private security detail that appeared to carry Charlie Kirk from the scene, race him away from campus, where he has now been pronounced dead by President Trump.
Of course, those moments, the video likely being seen across the internet, shows just how horrific this was. Thousands of students on that campus had gathered to hear Charlie Kirk, the conservative political activist, Turning Point USA. President Trump has credited Charlie Kirk with helping him to get elected again, to return to the White House, that it was Charlie Kirk who in large part was responsible in many ways for engaging young people across this country in a conservative movement to try to get President Trump back into the White House. The president himself has talked about the value of Charlie Kirk and having him so close as an outside advisor. And there you see them on the stage there. I want to bring in Pierre Thomas because, Pierre, our Chief Justice correspondent, you have reported often on this broadcast, World News Tonight, and here on ABC, about the political climate in this country and that authorities were worried about precisely this.
Indeed, David. I have a little bit of information to add to our reporting before I get to that. Law enforcement officials have been sent a bulletin regarding the situation, and I'll read to you what some of it says. It said that there was a video of an older man being taken into custody, but local authorities have confirmed to their colleagues that he is not the shooter, that what person was not the shooter, and at this time, quote, there is no suspect in custody. So my sources that I just spoke to, one of my sources I just spoke to said this is a dangerous and ongoing situation where shooter or at least one shooter is still out there. I asked the source any clear indication of whether they have a specific identity that they're looking for. They have no updates. So, David, again, a very dangerous situation. And
so, Pierre, let's just drill down on that, the news of this moment, what you're reporting here, because we had been on the air, people are on the air across the broadcast and cable spectrum here. For a time, there were reports and even some still images across social media of a man, it appeared, being taken into custody. Is that person is not in custody or is not connected to this? Just clear that up. And again, when police say the suspect is still at large, that's what we're to believe at this hour?
Correct. Again, law enforcement from around the country, they were made aware of a person temporarily taken into custody, but they have since determined, at least as of now, they do not believe that person was the shooter. That is the information that's been sent to law enforcement agencies around the country. There is no suspect in custody. They emphasize that, and now a manhunt underway to figure out who did this and why.
Pierre Thomas in our Washington Bureau. Pierre, thank you. I want to take our audience through what we have here, what we're comfortable sharing with you at home. Obviously, we're not going to show the horrific moment that played out in Utah today, the actual moment itself, because it's impossible to look at and wouldn't want to do that to you at home. But Charlie Kirk, just 31 years old, youth activist across the country, President Trump, the Trump family, often giving him credit for helping to bring young people into the movement to get President Trump back into the White House. There you see him. He was sitting under a tent right there at the university. There you can see another view of him. He was taking questions from the crowd, interacting with them, which is what he often does on his trips around the country, and had just begun another swing through the country. There had been thousands who signed petitions for him not to come. On the other side, there were at least 1,000 who said he should come to campus. But that kind of heat, that kind of controversy is something that he was very comfortable with. It's what drove his activism, and what he would often do is engage with people on all sides, take their questions, point, counterpoint, and it was during one of those moments, during one of those questions, that then gunfire a distance away, as you heard from Aaron Katersky, not confirmed but believed to be a couple hundred yards away somewhere on that campus. Gunfire then rang out after a question about gun violence in this country, about mass shootings in recent years in the United States. Then all of a sudden you heard the gunfire, you heard the gasps of the people who were gathered there, some people saying run. And of course, the image itself is just simply horrific. You could see that he was shot, it looked like in the neck, though we'll let authorities confirm that. There was blood coming from his neck. And as we reported here moments ago, it's believed that his security detail, his private security detail, is the group that then took him, raced him off that campus in the urgent effort to try to save Charlie Kirk. Again, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, you can understand that we're thinking about Charlie Kirk's wife. Her name is Erica. Charlie Kirk himself was just 31 years old. He had two young children, the youngest of whom turned one just this past May. I want to bring in Catherine Faulders, our Washington managing editor. And Catherine, it's impossible to overstate Charlie Kirk's influence within the White House, even though he wasn't an official advisor. And President Trump himself often giving Charlie Kirk a lot of credit for bringing young people into the fold.
Yeah, absolutely, David. The president himself did give Kirk a lot of credit along the way, of course, leading up to his win in November on the campaign trail. In fact, he gave Kirk a lot of credit, if not most of the credit, for a lot of that younger vote and for mobilizing a lot of those voters to go out and vote for him. I know the multiple times I've been over at the White House, I've witnessed Charlie Kirk there in the West Wing talking to advisors. Of course, not a formal advisor. He was responsible, David, for helping with a lot of the vetting of the top cabinet officials and had a lot of input. He was one of those people right next to Trump in a lot of these meetings in his ear, and Trump was taking his advice. It wasn't just the White House, it was across government agencies, the Department of Justice. I know Kirk was very close with the Attorney General, with the Deputy Attorney General, so he did have quite an influence within the administration, even though he wasn't so outwardly seen, if you will, at these agencies.
Catherine Faulders with us from our Washington Bureau. Catherine, we appreciate you and the team and the reporting here this afternoon on a very difficult story. Again, Charlie Kirk, co-founder of Turning Point USA, was shot and killed in Utah at a campus event, to the horror of the thousands who had gathered there. He was in the middle of what has become a trademark for him at these visits, in the middle of a debate, of sort of back and forth questions being asked of him. I want to show you there was a moment of silence on the House floor in Washington for Charlie Kirk just moments ago. Bipartisan calls to calm this down, to bring the rhetoric down in this country. Again, there was a moment of silence that came in from Washington. The images right there. There have been calls from both sides of the aisle to do something to tone down the rhetoric in this country. There are some of the images from the House floor, and we're even hearing from former Vice President Kamala Harris, who obviously was in a very contentious campaign against President Trump leading up to the most recent election. Charlie Kirk obviously was working to help get President Trump back into the White House, and even so, the former vice president saying, "I'm deeply disturbed by the shooting in Utah. Doug and I send our prayers. Let me be clear. Political violence has no place in America. I condemn this act, and we must all work together to ensure this does not lead to more violence." Again, calls from both sides of the aisle to calm down the rhetoric in this country. We're going to have much more on Charlie Kirk, the horrific event as it played out in Utah today. I'll see you for World News Tonight. For many of you, your local news is next.
This has been a special report.